Today we're standing in one of the most unique and interesting cemeteries that can be found anywhere in Appalachia. But to truly appreciate this hallowed ground, you've got to travel back in time to when the town of Pocahontas, Virginia, located just 10 miles from Bluefield, first came into existence. In the 1800s, local blacksmith Jordan Nelson found an outcropping of coal on his farm near here and was selling the excess coal to the locals for a penny a bushel. After the Civil War, the Industrial Revolution began churning, and those engines burned coal, lots of coal. The Southwest Virginia Improvement Company bought Nelson's farm for $2,000 and the mineral rights to another 500 acres for $4,000. The company had big visions, but hardly anyone lived here. Where would all the labor come from to mine the coal? The companies had to get creative. Almost daily, thousands of immigrants were stepping off boats on the southern shore of Manhattan, armed with little more than a desire for a better life and a strong work ethic. In the 1880s, coal companies had representatives standing on those docks, promising a job and a house in their native language, because few, if any of them, could speak English. So picture this. In less than 24 hours, many of those fresh faces were stepping off a boat in New York and then hopping a winding train heading deep into the coal fields of Appalachia. Imagine the culture shock that they felt. With this flood of immigration, the former village of Powell's Bottom, Virginia, became Pocahontas, and also one of the most multicultural and diverse towns in the United States. One of the first families to move into the new town were the Butts. Originally a cabinet maker, William and his wife Virginia also had the first child born in the new town. It was a girl. Her name? Minnie Pocahontas Butt. You can't make this stuff up. There were a few native white and black Virginians in this brand spanking new town, but the rolls also included many Hungarians, Russians, French, German, Italian, Poles and Swedes, Jews and Gentiles alike. Each non-English speaking group had mining instructions and rules written out in their own language. You want America as the great melting pot? Look no further. You had the real thing in Pocahontas, Virginia. These hardy immigrants immediately started mining the coal in 1881 for 20 cents a ton. But there were no rail cars here yet. It took the railroad a bit of time to catch up, but when it did a year later, the miners had already extracted and stacked mountains of coal, 40,000 tons of it. That's enough to fill the Empire State Building 8 times over. This coal was not just your run-of-the-mill, everyday black bituminous. Nope, not even close. It was some of the best coal ever mined in the United States. In fact, the U.S. Navy chose it exclusively for World War I and II because it didn't trail any smoke. Why is that important? Well, in the days before radar, smoke on the horizon was one way the enemy could find you on the open seas. Like the gold rush of 1849, boom towns sprang up all across the coal fields, and Pocahontas was among the best and the brightest, including a massive company store and an opera house that featured acts that had formerly appeared on Broadway. Elaborate and ornate buildings sprang up along Main Street, outfitted with the finest galvanized sheet iron facades shipped all the way from St. Louis, Missouri. So to recap, you've got one of the wonders of the world in a coal seam as thick as 13 feet in a coal field that spans 900 square miles. That's almost the size of Rhode Island. Enough of the black gold to fill rail cars stretched from New York all the way to Los Angeles and back. You've got a ready supply of fresh and energetic labor, a town that is booming. You've got emerging markets that desire your product. Life is good. Spring of 1884 rolls around. Dogwoods are in bloom. Temperatures are warming up. What could go wrong? Even though this mine had never had any major safety issues, coal mining in and of itself is a dangerous profession, and every kiss goodbye could be the last as the men marched off to do battle underground day after day. Just after midnight on March 13th, there was a shift change. It was the toughest shift. It's the shift where you put the rookies, the new employees. It was called the graveyard shift. The townspeople were used to hearing the dynamite charges that the miners would set off to loosen the coal from the face of the seam. But what happened in the wee early morning hours that day was different, far different. The ground shuddered, literally jolting the townspeople from their slumber. Houses 300 feet from the mine were knocked off their foundations. The sound of thunder was unlike any storm. Heavy mine cars were hurled into the air and human remains were scattered about. It was a nightmare. It gets worse. As the townspeople ran into the streets in their bedclothes, the fresh devastation was eerily illuminated by the glow of flames retching out of the mine's mouth. It was total chaos as the shrieks of panic-stricken family members filled the air. With the fire raging, there was no rescue possible, and the mine officials understood the grim task that stood before them. The only way to get the miners out was to extinguish the flames. The only way to do that was to flood the mine, and so they did. This was a new town, a boom town, and nobody had really put much thought into where a cemetery might need to be. However, now there were over 100 bodies, all to be buried at the same time. Re-enter cabinet maker William Butt, now recast as a coffin maker, and fortunately or unfortunately, off and on through the years, he was pretty busy until he entered his own handmade wooden coffin in 1924. The mine company deeded 11.5 acres for the creation of this cemetery, and you can learn much about a community from what's carved into these stones. And this cemetery has it all, from simple headstones to ornate obelisks and stylized crypts. But remember, this is 1884, less than 20 years after the end of the Civil War. And even though death most certainly is the ultimate equalizer, each one of this ethnically and racially diverse group were buried side by side. These miners from 1884 and later years both entered and left the mine as one race, the human race. And that's the enduring lesson that's seared into our hearts and minds today and for the future. We've made this journey to shine a light on the heritage of this incredibly unique part of Appalachian culture and history, and to share that heritage and the need for preservation of this amazing site.